Hi, I'm Tracy Schumacher. I'm a food and drink reporter for the USA Today Network, and today we are talking holiday wines. Wines for the holidays. What could be better? So I am here with Brian Stewart, who's a wine expert from Wegmans. He's the category merchant of wines, as well as Drew Chappett, and he is wine director for the Farmers Creek Side Tavern and Inn in Leroy, New York. So these guys are both certified sommeliers, have all your wine questions ready to answer. So please feel free to chime in. So this kind of was inspired by a couple of events. I was invited to go see Wegmans do their wine tastings to decide what to pair for their menu magazines.
Tough day, right?
That was awesome. That was really great. And so you had already narrowed down the wines, and we tasted with different dishes to decide what went better. And definitely some were better than others, although we did not agree on everything.
Absolutely not.
But it definitely shows that what you serve with your meal makes a big difference, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of variety of wine out there, as we all know, browsing the aisles at a wine shop. And we want to make sure that we're making the right suggestion to go with the meals that we're pairing with. So we get together with our chefs and try lots of different options. So
that was cool. Yeah. And I also went to a wine pairing dinner at Farmers Creek Side Tavern and Inn. And boy, it was delicious, and the wines really did highlight the foods. And that's a big area of focus in Leroy for you.
Yeah, surprisingly. Obviously, when you go that far outside the city into this small little village, you don't think that there's going to be this like sort of oasis in the desert, as we like to call it, where we're really focused on high quality food and high quality wine pairings with that. But sort of the ambition of the project is what led a lot of us there, myself and executive chef Sean Wolf, formerly of Char and the Inn on the Lake. But we're having a lot of fun with it, which I think is sort of the most important thing. And you know, both myself and Sean are sort of outside of the box thinkers, which I think you saw a little bit of in the media dinner. So yeah, we're having a lot of fun with it, and it's been a challenge so far, but one that we're going into head on. So. Oh,
good. Okay, so I would encourage people to send in their holiday menus so that these guys can give you some suggestions. I'm going to start with my own because I really think that mine's hard. So we're gonna go with that. So. My husband's Polish.
Okay.
And we make pierogies every year.
All right.
And we stuff them with cheese filling and a farmer's cheese filling, a potato filling, a sauerkraut filling. And then because nobody can agree on the meats, we have two different meats, a ham, and an unsmoked Polish sausage.
Okay.
And then there's other stuff, but that's kind of the main, that's the main gist of the dish.
What time should we be over?
I will share. We made so many pierogies this year. It's ridiculous.
That's
I put
awesome.
them on social media and I get all kinds of comments. So what would you serve with pierogies, kielbasa, and ham?
Okay. Do you want to go first, Drew?
Yeah, I have a couple ideas.
All right.
Sauerkraut's actually one of my favorite things to pair with, surprisingly. But like I said,
it's so acidic. I think it's kind of...
Right. I love high acid wines. So my first thought is Gruner Veltliner from Austria, which is something I frequently use with sauerkraut because it has this really dynamite acidity. The fruit character is in check, so it's not going to be sort of off-putting with the meat there. And it's got this really stunning minerality that'll blend right in with that.
So I just had a nice Gruner Veltliner from Anthony Road in the Finger Lakes.
Oh.
Would a New World, New York wine work as well, or would that not have the same characteristics as an Old World wine?
That's a tough question. There's so much variety in terms of quality of New World wines, especially with sort of obscure, European grapes that they don't work with all the time. So I didn't even know Anthony Road was doing Gruner.
Oh, it was delicious.
I know Herman Weimer over on Seneca Lake does a little bit of that. You have to keep in mind, the Finger Lakes has only been doing wine for 25 years. They've really honed in on Riesling. I think some of their Rieslings are the best in the world. But when you start getting to varietals that they've only been working with for a decade or two, you have to think going to Austria, where they've been doing this for 2,000 years. So they've really honed in on their craft, and they have vines that are older than anything that Finger Lakes has been producing. So you're getting more mature wines, and it's a toss-up.
Okay, so option number one is Gruner Veltliner. It's a white wine, okay.
Good call, and actually that was going to be one of my suggestions as well.
Seriously? Wow. Home run.
Well, it's kind of what grows together goes together, so we're thinking Eastern European countries. Austria makes very austere, lean wines. I was also thinking Germany as well. One of my favorite wine pairings would be a Riesling with anything. So a nice drier style Riesling from Germany, I think would be an outstanding pairing. It will go well with a variety of different foods and won't overpower anything as well. And the acidity as well will link up with sauerkraut. So.
Well, that's awesome because Riesling's one of my favorites.
It's the best grape in the world.
It's kind of hard to beat it.
Oh, good. So, when in doubt, go with a Riesling.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, Finger Lakes does a phenomenal job with Riesling.
Yeah, I have a couple here that are some of my favorites. So I have two that I happen to get in my travels. One is from Boundary Breaks, and it's kind of on the semi-sweet side, I thought it was delicious. One's from Trestle 31, much drier wine, made to age for a little while. Would you go with a drier style or something with a little sweetness? Or does it matter?
Depends on the crowd, I think.
Okay.
You know who's coming over for dinner better than I do. So,
probably sweetness.
So exactly. So sometimes it's a little easier to lean towards the sweeter side.
Okay.
And it's going to be more of a crowd pleaser.
Okay.
Yeah, you can't really go wrong there.
Okay. So I was just asked what the name of our experts are. So I'm going to reintroduce them real quickly. Brian Stewart is category merchant of wine for Wegmans Food Markets, which is a grocery store chain in
the Northeast. We have 6 stores in the Northeast of the U.S. So we've been selling wine for
6 states.
I'm sorry, 6 states.
I think it's like 95 stores.
Yeah, lot more than 6 stores. But we've been selling wine for 15 years. Started with our store in New Jersey, so it's been a lot of fun.
Okay, and then Drew is certified sommelier and director of wine for Farmers Creekside Tavern and Inn in Leroy. Okay, so hope I cleared that up. And again, please feel free to comment with your wine pairings questions, or if you need gift ideas or something like that. So I'm gonna keep going with my questions because I have plenty. So I have a son who's 22. So if he needs to take a bottle of wine to a party and not spend too much. Okay. Any ideas of what to take along? 10 to 15 bucks maybe?
Well, I think sparkling wine is always a great option.
Okay.
You can't really go wrong there for the holidays, especially New Year's is just around the corner from Christmas. And I'd venture to say that everyone likes sparkling wine, or they'll at least drink it. For toast or anything like that. You can get some really nice ones. The Bon Vivant falls into that price range. I have a Cremant de Loire from France that's also in that price range. So you can get high quality sparkling wines at that price and the real crowd pleasers, so that's always a fun way to go.
Maybe even a Prosecco would work as well. They tend to come into a nice value range and would work very well in that age group.
Okay, so if you've got a 22-year-old young man taking a bottle of bubbly to a party, any tips on if they decide to open it at the party?
Make sure it's nice and cold.
Okay.
Opening a warm bottle of sparkling wine is not fun. Trust me.
It's a roller coaster ride.
Yeah. So you have a very good chance of the cork exploding and making a huge mess.
Okay. So. And maybe keep your hand on top of that cork until you get it.
Yeah, always try to keep your thumb on top, kind of.
There we go.
Like that. Don't take the cage off all the way before you have the cork, and if you just twist the bottle slowly and keep pressure on that cork, you can just ease it out. Or if you're that age, you might just want to pop it and spray everyone in the room. So.
Right.
Yeah, but I don't know. I think the lack of a pop is a little slicker.
Yeah, technically, you want it to whisper.
Whisper.
Not pop.
There you go. Whisper, not pop. And I actually heard at our pairings that you said that bubbly is another universal.
Absolutely.
Goes with a lot of good things.
So traditionally, the base wine for sparkling wine and Champagne was Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So by
red and a white.
Exactly. So by themselves, those are 2 of the best food wines there are. And then when you combine those with the bubbles and the nice crisp acidity, it tends to pair well with a very large variety of foods.
Awesome. Do you agree?
Yeah, and obviously as a sommelier in a restaurant, if I ever truly get stumped, sparkling wine's always kind of my emergency break.
Do you actually truly get stumped?
I try not to.
It happens. There's a lot of wines out there, so Eventually, someone's going to ask a question you don't know the answer to. But
it'll usually be 6 people who want one bottle of wine, and they're getting everything from like a big juicy steak to scallops to Chilean sea bass and quesadillas, and I'm just like.
And you need something to kind of go with all of that.
There's so much acidity there. There's so much effervescence that it really lends itself to almost any food type.
Good to know. Okay. So again, we're here talking holiday wines. I'm going to go on to my next question. So I was invited to a party, and this is very similar, but different demographic here because I'm obviously not 22 years old. And I was invited to a party, and the directions are they provide the cheese and the food, and the guests are instructed to bring an interesting bottle of wine. I mean, the interesting has me running for cover, like interesting. And obviously what a Som would find interesting is way different than, but you tend to think with this kind of invitation, probably, these are people that know a little bit about wine.
Right.
So what would you go for?
I would do something they wouldn't expect, like a Cru Beaujolais. So Beaujolais kind of gets a stigma as just being a real simple introductory wine because of Beaujolais Nouveau, which is a fun wine for the holidays. It's released the third Thursday in November of every year, and it's just a fun way to kick off the holiday season. But Cru Beaujolais are a very serious wine, but they can also be fruit-driven as well, which I think you need for pairing with cheese. Cheese is actually one of the hardest things to pair with wine.
Oh, really? Especially when there's probably a lot of different kinds.
The stronger the flavor of cheese, it becomes extremely difficult to pair with wine. So if you don't know what the cheeses are going to be, I would take something a little bit more fruit-driven, personally.
So a Cru Beaujolais, which is different than a Nouveau Beaujolais.
Correct. A little more serious.
And would there be a vintage you'd be looking for? Is that something you drink a little older?
Generally, those are still on the younger side.
Okay.
So not as young as a Beaujolais Village, but relatively speaking, something within the last 5 years.
Okay. Sounds good. You'd go way, I can just see your grain. You'd go to like Romania or something.
Well, you told me not to be too esoteric.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, something I've had a lot of luck pairing cheese with is obviously a very obscure wine from the Republic of Georgia.
I was close.
You were close.
Republic of Georgia, okay.
Yeah, so...
Not the state of Georgia?
Not the state of Georgia. They have a very interesting style of winemaking, and they use a lot of techniques that actually date back 8,000 years, in which they use these large clay pots called qvevri, and they're buried in the ground, and it's all sort of spontaneous, natural fermentation. And they also leave their white wines on the skin, so they're extracting color. What we call orange wines, they call amber wines. But they do Arcatzelli very well in this style. So you get some fruit there. It's a little different quality. It's more sort of like dried orange peel, that sort of thing. But it has this like wonderful texture and still has great acidity. And I've had a lot of luck pairing with all sorts of different kinds of cheeses with that. Obviously, you don't find those very often.
You can find an Arcatzelli here in the Finger Lakes.
You can find an Arcatzelli, and they're actually starting to do an amphora Arcatzelli, I believe.
I thought I saw maybe Atwater doing kind of an orange wine. No, maybe I'm wrong.
There are a few wineries around.
Okay.
I believe Red Tail Ridge does one. Steve Shaw does one with Sauvignon Blanc or Pinot Grigio.
Maybe I could have that wrong. So don't quote me on that. So an orange wine, I think definitely an amber orange wine. That certainly is an interesting wine. I have to point out that one of the reasons I knew that you'd go a little geeky with this is your background. I mean, didn't you? Before you were a sommelier,
I was an anthropologist.
There you go.
I was living in a jungle in Mexico for a time, studying with a little Mayan community. And eventually, after doing that for 15 years, and I love doing the research, and I still go back there every year because I've actually been adopted into that family. So, I go to Mexico to visit my family now. But in terms of finding a career path, I was only really finding teaching jobs, and I just decided that didn't really appeal to me all that much. And kind of at the same time, I got interested in wine, and as I started learning more, I found out there's so much history and culture, and there's 50 million grape varietals to learn about. And I just really found that I had a passion to learn about that. And exactly what you're saying is that's kind of why I find places like Georgia very interesting, because there is a very deep anthropological component to that. So, yeah.
Cool. Okay, I'm going to just say again, we're talking holiday wines. If you have any questions, if you have any holiday menus that you want some answers to questions on, please let me know. I can see that there's a lot of people joining us, but not so many people asking questions. So I'll keep going. But boy, this is your chance to get your questions answered. Pop me a holiday menu. Give them. Let's make these guys. Let's give them some curveballs. Okay, so I'm going to give you another question. So my husband wants to give a gift of wine. And he remembered the person liking a red wine at a party. So this is pretty much what I have to go on.
Okay.
He thought it might have been what he called a meritage, which I think it's actually pronounced meritage.
Meritage, yeah.
Any thoughts for
what
red
kind
wine
of
gifts?
price range are we talking?
Well, it's a coworker, so it's not like, super.
Does he like his coworkers?
Yeah, well, why would he give him a gift
How
without
about $50? Sound about right?
Yeah, that would
30,
be the very,
30 to 50?
let's say more toward the 30 than the 50.
30-ish range. I think you could do a nice Cabernet from Napa Valley. And more specifically, you can get something from the Oakville district, possibly in that price range. So in that $30 to $40 range. I think Napa Valley is a really good pick. They've had a lot of consistency in vintages over the last 4 years. So you don't have to worry as much about the vintage. Almost every year has been a home run for them from a winemaking perspective. So I think it's going to be a crowd pleaser to do a Napa Valley Cab. That's the route I would go. Okay,
perfect.
So when you say Meritage, that's a Bordeaux-style blend.
Yeah.
So you're thinking Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, Petit Verdot.
Well done, well done. And then you can just trip that right off your tongue.
Yeah,
I can
there'll be a
tell.
quiz later.
Yeah. So those are kind of like Brian said, Cabernet Sauvignon would be an awesome option. I would go something similar to a Bordeaux-style blend. One I really like is actually from Long Island. It's the Wolfer Estate Classic Red, which is a Merlot dominant blend, but it's got some Cab Franc, it's got some Cabernet Sauvignon in it too, but really bright, juicy fruit. Not as tannic as something from Napa Valley, not as structured, but I like to try to keep people in New York for holidays if I can, just to kind of showcase what we can do here. And I think it's one of the best coming out of Long Island for that style blend.
Nice. I'm not at all familiar with Long Island.
Yeah, they actually have a climate that's very similar to Bordeaux. So obviously here in the Finger Lakes, we have a lot of problems ripening grapes like Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot. But in Long Island, they have all the warm weather coming off the Atlantic Ocean, so they're able to do a lot better with those varietals than we are.
And they're surrounded by water, so it's helps moderate the temperature a little bit. We actually went out and visited Wolfer a few weeks ago.
Did you, for Wegmans?
Yep. Beautiful property, great people. They're making some outstanding products out there.
Wolfer.
So. Yep.
W-O-L-F-E-R, Wolfer?
2 Fs.
W-O-L-F-F-E-R, Wolfer.
Yep, yes.
Okay, so something to check out for reds. Okay, so what group is this was one question, so I'm going to refresh everybody's memory. I am talking holiday wines. I'm a food and drink reporter for the USA Today Network. I'm here with Brian Stewart from Wegmans and Drew Chappett from Farmers Creekside Tavern and Inn. They both are wine directors. They both are certified somms, and they can answer your wine questions. Okay, so one of the questions is, how do you feel about Par 44 Frozen Tundra? I know it is cheaper, but I hear it's good. I don't even know what this means. Is that something you're familiar with? Par 44? No. Dustin Mack, I think we might need a little more information on that one to answer it.
Yeah, that's a new one to me too.
Okay. So here's Julia is serving both hot and cold shrimp. So this is a pairing question. You ready? Mm-hmm. Hot and cold shrimp. One with a very spicy sauce, the other garlic and butter sauce. Looking for something fun, but also serving folks who don't really drink wine.
Okay.
I'm going to let either one of you jump in when you have an answer. That's a good one,
That's
especially because, you think of shrimp, you think, white wines because go with, white, with seafood, but with the spicy sauces and the garlic and butter, those are strong flavors. Where do you go with that? Yeah,
if it has to be one wine, it makes it tricky because with the spiciness, I'd like to do something a little bit more fruity or sweet, but with the butter, you maybe want the sweetness maybe less.
Okay.
Involved, so
something a little creamier too to go with that texture.
So maybe if you did two, what would the two look like?
You got one, Drew?
You got
got
a
one.
good one
Drew's
there,
got
Julia.
one. Yeah.
I'm going to take the easy one and pair with the garlic and butter shrimp. So obviously we just talked about needing something creamy. Something I like that's a little fun is Pinot Blanc from Germany, which is a great price point. It's usually $10 or less. It's got just a hint of fruit. It's got some nice acidity because it's from Germany, but it's just got this very creamy, buttery texture, almost like a Chardonnay. Not quite as oaky, but I can drink tons of Pinot Blanc.
Oh, that sounds good. I'm not familiar with that, but for me, a lot of times the oak and Chardonnay is too much, so that might be a good option.
Yeah, kind of.
If you feel that way.
For people who like you don't like oak, it's another option where you still get that creaminess, but you're not off put by all that vanilla and toastiness that you get from the oak.
With a spicier shrimp, Riesling again would be another default option. Sparkling wine or a nice rosé, a more fruit-forward style rosé, I think would work as well.
Okay, so there you go, Julia. So we're talking a fruit-forward, rosé, Riesling, and a Pinot Blanc. So Dustin asked, okay, so Dustin, so I'm a reporter from Rochester, New York. I'm with the USA Today Network. We have, this is going out on the USA Today Eats page, which is national. USA Today Eats also has properties in Milwaukee and places like that. So that's probably why you're seeing us. We're in Rochester. Wegmans is a Northeast type grocery store chain, whereas Farmers Creekside Inn is in New York. But again, these are guys that can answer any holiday wine pairing question, but probably can't comment specifically on Wisconsin wines. Julia, thanking you so much.
Oh yeah, anytime.
So if you have any other holiday food pairing questions, I'm happy to get them answered. If the questions kind of wind down, we're probably going to wind down too. I'm gonna ask. I think I have one more. Oh, so I was chatting with a coworker, straight out of school, and she likes wine, but she said she just is. She doesn't usually order it at restaurants because she's very overwhelmed by wine. She orders cider because she knows cider. She'll have a she'll drink beer. She likes the darker beers, which shows that she's got some sophisticated palate to a certain extent. But wine, she said she doesn't even know where to start. What do you tell people if they are interested in wine but really want to go to school? I mean, I started with White Zinfandel in the 80s, but that's probably not what maybe people do now. I don't know.
Yeah. So here's what I always tell people, because obviously being a sommelier in a restaurant, it can be very intimidating to people, and a lot of times they don't even bother talking to me. But the important thing to remember is no one's born being a sommelier. We all start from the same place. In college, I had the box of Franzia, on my shelf. So it's important.
And it was
to remember,
very good at the time,
it was
right?
very good at the time.
That was a great place
Yeah.
to start.
So it's just a matter of being open and just put yourself out there. Just pick a wine and try it. You might not like it, but maybe you will, and that's how you're going to discover what you do like. And also, don't be afraid to talk to the sommelier. We do not care what questions you have. We are just happy that you're interested in. Otherwise, I'm just kind of standing in the back twiddling my thumbs. But if you have a question, no matter how small or insignificant you think it may be, I can assure you, we are more than happy to talk you through anything and geek out if you need to, or just make wine more accessible for you. So don't be scared of your somms.
Yep. I will say that as a younger person, when I worked in the business world before I switched to journalism, and I would go out with clients, and when the somm came up, it would be like, Yeah. I always thought that maybe they wouldn't like, my questions and all that other kind of stuff. What both of you asked me first was, what is your price range? Like, it's okay to have a certain price range, right? And you'll work within
on our
that.
list we have wines starting at $20 a bottle, going up to $650. But something I try to focus on is value-centric wines, and maybe making things that are less known and maybe a little bit less accessible at a better price point, so you're more willing to try it.
And they can tend to be better values. There's not always a huge marketing dollars put into those types of wine, so they can put more money into making a higher quality product.
So from the Wegmans perspective, if you're talking about somebody who's right out of the gate, out of college, interested in wine, doesn't know where to start,
Well,
where would you start them?
Drew makes a really good point. You want to make friends with your local wine shop stewards and get to know folks. They're there to help you. And we carry 10,000 plus different products. So it can be overwhelming for a lot of customers. So knowing your budget is extremely important. And then I would take a deep dive into a region and kind of, I started with France personally. I found those wines to be very interesting and very food friendly. And I used to work in a restaurant as well, so that was important to me. So just pick one area of expertise and kind of learn as much as you can. And the diversity of wine is kind of what makes it very interesting for us. There's so many different products out there. So just have fun with it.
Well, and I know for myself, I have spent a lot of times just exploring the Finger Lakes in New York, because that's where we are. You can go to the wineries, you can explore them. So I would say 90% of the wine bottles in my house are from the Finger Lakes, because it's just a great place to start. And you know, the Rieslings, my gosh, the Rieslings are fun in themselves. So not that I have a lot of bottles of wine in my house, because I really don't. But anyway, so let's see. Okay, so Julia, rock and roll. I'm so glad you're asking these questions. Let's talk dessert wines. Oh, this is a toughie. Dessert wines under $20 for creme brulee. Is there such a thing?
Well,
because I think of dessert wines and I think
a rule of thumb, Julia, just a broad rule of thumb is you want your dessert wine to be sweeter than the dessert. Otherwise, it can be a little bit more of a conflicting pairing. So there are a lot of great options out there. In the Finger Lakes, they make a ton of great dessert wines. The tricky thing is something like an ice wine tends to be pretty cost prohibitive if the grapes are actually out there freezing on the vines. So you can do a late harvest Riesling would work with a creme brulee. I like Tokai from Hungary. Tokai, yeah.
T-A-K.
Oh boy, it's like Tokagai.
Oh yeah, because it's Hungary. Of course, it's
exactly.
not what you would think.
It's a little trickier to spell, but has really complex, interesting flavors. It's a lot of fun.
Tell me again what kind of wine it was.
Tokai.
Yeah, and what was the?
It's a dessert-style wine made from the ferment grape.
Okay.
And they actually classify them by putonias. So the more putonias that there are, it means more bushels of grapes technically went into that wine. So a 4 or 5 putonia wine you could possibly get in that $20-ish range.
So now you're going geeky on me.
I couldn't help it.
That's what these guys do. What do you think?
Yeah, so the thing about dessert wines is usually they tend to have a lot more labor put behind them, so the price is usually a reflection of that. Something that we have in the Finger Lakes, and if you're from Virginia or Michigan or Wisconsin, something you can kind of look for are hybrids or even indigenous grape varietals. For instance, we have something called Vidal Blanc here in the Finger Lakes, which is a French-American hybrid. But they do a lot of great dessert wine from that, and it tends to be priced a lot lower than something like a late harvest Riesling or Tokai even. Another good option is, if you're familiar with Sauternes, there's a couple other areas in Bordeaux that aren't from the classic Sauternes area. So they're made in a very similar style. They're nice and sweet, sweeter than almost any dessert could be. Typically made from the same grapes. But one I really enjoy is Cadillac.
Cadillac, like the car.
Like the car, yes. So it's reaching a little bit below Sauternes, but obviously it doesn't have as big a reputation. So one we have on our menu is the Chateau Manos, and you can find that in a half bottle for around $10 or $15.
And you think you can find that at a wine store, perhaps?
I believe so. Century here in Rochester, which is Wegmans owned, has a really great selection of Bordeaux-style dessert wines, and they have a lot of great price points there. So,
I'm going to correct you on Century. It's not exactly Wegmans owned. Right?
They have great wine, though.
But they do. As I understand it, anyway, I just feel like I'm going to just throw that out
back
there.
to Julia's price range question. I think you touched upon something important. With a dessert wine, usually they are in a smaller format bottle. So either a half or even a quarter size bottle. So you get a lot more bang for the buck. So if you're spending $20 on a dessert wine, you can actually usually get something really good.
Yeah, and you serve them in small quantities because they're
yep.
so
yeah,
intense.
it's hard to drink a full 8-ounce pour of a dessert wine, honestly.
Yeah, that sounds good. Julie, I want to come to your house and have your 2 shrimps and your dessert wine and creme brulee. That sounds wonderful. And just to close the loop on Dustin, Eats Parallel 44 is a winery in Wisconsin that I think we all need to go check out and figure it out.
I love Wisconsin.
Me too. I'm from Chicago, so
okay, cool.
And I went to school at Marquette University in Wisconsin, so that's all right up my alley. Okay, so I think I'm gonna. Is there anything else you guys want to add about holiday wines? I feel like the questions are kind of slowing down. Any other advice?
My number one advice is drink what you like. So that's the most important thing. No pairing is going to work if you don't like the wine. So explore lots of different regions. There's lots of fun wines out there, and when you're talking to your wine steward, it always helps to let them know what your budget is, and they'll be able to help you quite a bit.
Yeah, and have fun. I mean, it's the holidays. It can be stressful the older you get, but don't forget about yourself when you're giving gifts. I like to treat myself to a nice German Riesling every year when my family comes over. It's nice to, as a sommelier, I'm constantly giving wine out for the holidays and bringing wine to dinners, but don't forget about yourself.
And when you're treating yourself, it's a German Riesling.
More often than not.
Cool. Nice. Okay, well, we've been doing these chats every so often. My colleague Will Cleveland talked about beer last week. If you have any more questions, wait, we got a late breaker. Is it worth paying, okay, this is Gasper. Is it worth paying, this is a very good question because we're heading into New Year's. Is it worth paying the extra amount for real champagne? That's a great question. Boy, there's smiles, I don't know.
If you can, it really is.
It's really good.
Yeah.
They're making great wine in California. Well, a lot of different regions make great sparkling wine. You technically can't call it a champagne unless it's from Champagne in France. Anderson Valley, actually we brought a bottle here. Ooh. From the Anderson Valley in California.
I'm holding it up.
Yep, northern part of Sonoma. It's got cool nights, warm days, so it helps ripen the fruit, helps lock in the acidity. So it emulates a champagne. It's made from the same grapes, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. But a true champagne, the soils are perfect. These limestone, chalky soils, perfect for growing those grapes, perfect acidity. A lot of the wines are hand riddled, so that means they put them in a rack and kind of stir up the yeast.
Turn them
slowly over time. There's a lot of laws about how they can produce their products, so you know you're getting a quality product when you're spending the money for the champagne. But if you have someone that you trust that can make recommendations, there are some great sparkling wine values out there, just like the Bon Vivant that I recommended there.
Yeah, Bon Vivant was the brand, the sparkling wine that was here. I held it up and I realized it was blocked by my computer, so that didn't do a lot of good. Anything to add about champagne versus sparkling wine?
I get this question a lot in a restaurant, like why do I want to pay $50 more for a real champagne when I could, a cava or a prosecco for a lot cheaper? And really what it comes down to is just depth and complexity of flavor. Champagne will make you dance on a table. I mean, it can be so aromatically enjoyable.
In the best way.
In the best way. Without even having tasted it, honestly. You can just put it up to your nose and it can just lift you up so much. And it's something you really have to experience at least once in your life. That being said, Brian is totally right. I mean, there are some other really great options. I also brought a sparkling wine. This is a Cremant de Loire. Anytime you see Cremant, that is a great substitute for champagne. What it is a wine from France that's made in the same style as champagne, called Method Champenois, but it's not from the actual region of Champagne, so you're not paying all those marketing dollars for it. And it can be different grapes, but it's a good substitute if you want something along the vein of a champagne experience without breaking the budget.
And by Cremant de Loire, I'm assuming
Loire is the region
in France. Okay, I think that's the hard thing to get around. To learn when you're learning about the wines is the idea that in places like France, the wines are named for the region versus the grape. So so there's there's a lot to learn. But
once you learn the trick, then you've got it. In
Yeah.
Burgundy, if it's red, it's Pinot Noir. If it's white, it's Chardonnay. And in Bordeaux, it's typically either Cabernet or Merlot-based
blend.
wine.
Yeah.
In the Loire, the whites are generally Sauvignon Blancs. After that, it gets a little more tricky.
Yeah.
Reds are Cab Franc, and southern France can go any direction. A lot of Malbec down there as well. So that's why I liked France as a category to study, because
There's a lot to learn.
the regions are very diverse, but the grapes are similar to what you would know. Cabernet, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Malbec, Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I think we've got. I hope that helped you, Gasper. I think we're going to sign off. But if you have any more ideas for topics you'd like covered on a Facebook Live from USA Today, send me an email, Tracy, TRACYS @gannett.com, and we will take that into account. And thank you, Brian, and thank you, Drew, for joining me. And I hope that was helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.